Unveiling Strong Delusion, Video 32, Milcah, the mother of Rebekah, Part 5, Oedipus, Akhnaton, and Bethuel. Here we have the famous bust of Queen Uragania, the younger wife of Oedipus, the king of Thebes, and the funeral mask of Prince Eteocles of Thebes. Immanuel Velikovsky. This video derives from Immanuel Velikovsky's book, Oedipus and Akhnaton, but adds Bethuel and Rebekah to the story. I've used Velikovsky's spelling of Akhnaton. Best known for his Worlds in Collision, Velikovsky believed in the spinning Earth and universe model. He hypothesized that collisions between Mars, Venus, and the Earth account for many historical events. His father played a major role in the 19th century Zionist movement, and Velikovsky strongly supported Zionism. A quote from Velikovsky, "My first name, I have no middle name, was chosen by my father, as he told me, on that solitary walk in the forested hills. He selected it from a verse of the 7th chapter of Isaiah. There was no Immanuel among our ancestors known to him." Quote, "Therefore the Lord himself shall give you a sign. Behold, a virgin shall conceive, and bear a son, and shall call his name Immanuel." Isaiah 7:14. And most people recognize this as a reference to Jesus. And of course, this Isaiah 7:14 has very interesting numbers in it. And this video doesn't so much rely on Worlds in Collision, or doesn't at all, but more on Velikovsky's Ages in Chaos, and of course Oedipus and Akhnaton. And here we have a quote. I'm going to quote from this introduction to Ages in Chaos, because Velikovsky had a very interesting theory that our history is distorted in 300 and 600 year cycles, that they're mixed up, and I think it actually should be 600 and 900 year cycles. Many wondrous things happen when historical perspective is distorted. In order to understand the scope of the displacement in the history of the ancient world, and I think this applies to modern world too, one must try to conceive of the chaos which would result if a survey of Europe and America were written in which the history of the British Isles were some 600 years out of line, so that in Europe and America the year would be 1941, while in Britain it would be 1341. As Columbus discovered America in 1492, the Churchill of 1341 could not have visited this country, but must have visited some other land. The scholars would be divided in their opinion as to the whereabouts of that land, and met its chief, another chief, not Franklin Delano Roosevelt of Washington, which would live in history as co-signer of a charter with Churchill of Britain in 1341. The tales of Oedipus and Akhnaton both involve incest between mother and son. The tales reflect the tale of Rhea, Hera, the earth goddess, marrying her son Zeus Jupiter after he castrated his father, Kronos or Saturn. The earth goddess goes by other names in different cultures, including Sibyl or Kibble. Sibyl has eunuch priests called the Gali priests or rooster priests. Gallo, Gallus, meaning rooster, Gali, roosters, Gala, oak apple, and Galileo Galilei, the eunuch priest of the sun. Scholars tell us the Oedipus story took place over 2,700 years ago. Sophocles wrote 3 plays about Oedipus: Oedipus Rex, Oedipus at Colonus, and Antigone. Sophocles' play Antigone did not appear in print until 1502 A.D. by the Aldine Press, owned by Aldus Pius Manutius. Manutius published many rare Greek works, which he or someone near him probably wrote. Renaissance fraud. The Renaissance, or rebirth, or the Phoenix Rising might better have the name the Age of Fraud. All ancient classical literature and history magically appeared in the Renaissance, or the Age of Fraud. Poggio Bracciolini, short arms, or T-Rex arms, discovered the works of the Roman historian Tacitus. Around 1420, the Milanese Gasparino Barcisa discovered the works of Cicero. Aldus Manutius published a 5-volume edition of Aristotle between 1495 and 1498. Manutius' Aldine Press also published Erasmus translations of Euripides' plays Hecuba and Iphigenia in Aulus. Together with Erasmus, Manutius published various other ancient works, including works of Plutarch, supposedly who lived 46 AD to after 119 AD. Coincidentally, Plutarch had a 14th century duplicate named Petrarch, 1304 to 1374, both with the arch or arc in their names. Poggio Bracciolini. Poggio Bracciolini, 1380 to 1459, quote, discovered and published the opuses of Quintilian, Valerius Flaccus, Asconius Pedianus, Nonius Marcellus, Probus, some tractates by Cicero, Lucretius, Petronius, Plautus, Tertullian, Marcellinus, Carpon Seculus, etc. The circumstances of these discoveries and their datings have never been related in detail. End of quote. Anatoly T. Fomenko, History, Science, or Fiction or Science. And a lot of people talk about Fomenko, but I don't think too many people have actually read him. He goes much further than just saying that we have 1,000 years added to our history, much, much further than that. Hockart and Ross. In the 19th century, two authors independently argued that Poggio Bracciolini wrote the works of Tacitus. Polydore Hockart, De l'authenticité des annales et des histoires de Tacite, and John Wilson Ross, Tacitus and Bracciolini, the annals forged in the 15th century. Because scholars couldn't refute their arguments, they ignored them, or treated them with obtumescence, meaning they stayed mute, and my first and only opportunity to use that word. The first copy of the works of the historian Suetonius appeared in the 16th century. Not a single ancient copy of Euclid's Elements survives, and allegedly some from the 10th to 13th century survive. The ancient astronomer Ptolemy's Almagest appeared right before the works of Copernicus. A complete text of Archimedes did not appear until 1884, and so it goes. Quote, here, a small group of specialists, largely working together, developed a consensus about the Dead Sea Scrolls in lieu of clear historical insight or firm textual grasp. Preconceptions and reconstructions, such as they were stated as facts, and these results, which were used to corroborate each other, in turn became new assumptions that were used to draw away a whole generation of students unwilling or simply unable to question the works of their mentors. And that's a quote by Robert Eisenman, a well-known biblical scholar, in his book Maccabees, Zadokites, Christians, and Qumran. And this applies to all biblical scholars, historians in general, scientists. It applies to Eisenman. People accept what they have been taught, because if they don't get professorships, they don't get their doctorate, they don't get jobs, they get ridiculed by the community, because stepping out of the box doesn't work in the academic community. Quote, normal science, in Thomas Kuhn's sense, exists. It is the activity of the non-revolutionary, or more precisely, the not-too-critical professional, of the science student who accepts the ruling dogma of the day. In my view, the normal scientist, as Kuhn describes him, is a person one ought to be sorry for. He has been taught in a dogmatic spirit. He is a victim of indoctrination. I can only say that I see a very great danger in it, and in the possibility of it becoming normal, a danger to science and indeed to our civilization. And this shows why I regard Kuhn's emphasis on the existence of this kind of science as so important. And that's a quote by Karl Popper, a well-known 20th century philosopher of science, talking about Kuhn's structure of scientific revolutions. But again, this applies to them too, because Kuhn accepts the works of Galileo and Kepler and, rockets to the moon and all these other things that just some thought can disprove. According to historians, most of the ancient writers wrote on parchment, not paper. To make one sheet of parchment, you have to skin a less than 6-week-old calf or lamb, and calf parchment is called vellum, soften the skin in running water for about 6 days, loosen the skin by scrubbing it with ash and lime in a damp pit for 12 to 22 days, scrape off the wool, ferment the skin in oat or wheat bran to get rid of excess lime, tan the skin after drying to make it soft, and sand it with pumice to make it smooth. My PDF copy of Plato's complete works has 3,490 pages. Aristotle's complete works has 3,354 pages, and so on. And art also shows that our timelines are wrong, as Fomenko talked about. And here we have a picture on the left of Cicero in the blue. And Cicero, historians tell us, lived from 106 BC to 43 BC. And next to him on the right, in the red, is, this picture says, is Cato the Younger, who lived from 95 BC to 46 BC, which would make him only 49 at the most in this picture, and he looks a lot older than that. And then the person on the right in the black hat is, according to the caption of this picture, Scipio Africanus, and he was a legendary Roman warrior, military general, and he supposedly lived 236 BC to 183 BC, which puts him 100 years or more away from the two people on the left. And then the other person next to him is Gaius Laelius, who lived at basically the same time as Scipio and was another general. And so the two people on the right can't fit in with the two people on the left historically in our current historical timeline. And I'd like you to look at a couple things here. Scipio and Laelius have red hair, which I find very interesting, and we'll see a lot of red-haired people here. Laelius has some kind of hand sign going on here with his right forefinger over his left thumb, and Cato seems to have the same hand sign going on, or something very similar. And here we have another picture very similar to the first one, but in black and white. And we obviously the same people in it, except for that now they have different labels. Now the older guy who was Cato in the first one is now Gaius Laelius, which would have been this guy in the first one, who lived around 200 BC. Then now this guy has become Quintus Ennius, father of Roman poetry, who also lived 200 or so BC. And then here we have Gaius Musius Cordus, who was known as Scaevola, and we don't have much information about him, but he was a brave, heroic Roman person who lived about 500 BC, or 300 years before the other two. And Cicero, again, 106 to 43 BC. So here we have the two pictures again, and we can just see what the artist did here. He took this hat in this picture and moved it to him. Took this hat in this picture and moved it to him. And you can notice in both pictures, this gentleman here has this hand sign going on, which I don't really know what that hand sign means, but maybe somebody can enlighten us. Now back to the Oedipus story. King Laius and Queen Jocasta long had remained childless. When Jocasta finally conceived, the oracle told the parents the child would grow up and kill his father and marry his mother. Laius bound the child's feet together with a pin and ordered Jocasta to kill him. Unable to kill her son, Jocasta gave the infant to a servant to take to a wasteland to die. Swollen feet or legs. Oedipus means swollen feet or legs, from the Greek odao, to swell, and pous, foot. It can refer to swollen legs because the Greek pous does not distinguish between foot and leg. Historians tell us the swelling happened because his parents pierced his feet, apparently to make it harder for the infant to walk away. Like many historical explanations, the illogical sticks around because of consensus. Artwork depicts Akhnaton with strangely swollen legs, which we'll see later. Another explanation exists based on the Rh blood factors. The line of Abraham engaged in incest. Abraham married Sarah, his half-sister. Isaac married Rebekah, the daughter of Milcah, the sister of Abraham his father. Jacob married Rachel and Leah, the daughters of Laban, the brother of Rebekah, Jacob's mother. After the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, Lot begat Moab with his older daughter and Ben-Ami with his younger daughter. Leviticus 8 forbids incest, and biblical scholars have had a hard time reconciling incest in the family of Abraham. And here we have a painting called Lot and His Daughters by an artist named Jan Matsis, that's given to you both two different ways online, who lived 1510 to 1575. And you notice that they're wearing more or less medieval clothing and pretty fancy clothing at that. And notice that this daughter here has obviously red hair, and this daughter here has darker red hair. And Fomenko argues that the Sodom and Gomorrah story must represent Herculaneum and Pompeii destroyed by Vesuvius, supposedly in 79 A.D. But Vesuvius also exploded in 1500 B.C. and a bunch of other times. It's exploded a lot. And if it did happen in 1500, then this painting might have occurred almost contemporaneously with the event. Most people have Rh positive blood. An estimated 5 to 15% of the world population has Rh negative blood. The internet abounds with information about Rh negative blood, none of it verifiable. Some say it comes from interbreeding with aliens or reptilians or fallen angels, which fits with the story of Cadmus and the dragon's teeth. Some say presidents and royals have Rh negative blood. I don't know who tested Trump, Obama, W. Clinton, Prince Charles, or Queen Elizabeth, but the internet says they have Rh negative blood, so who can doubt it? When an Rh positive man breeds with an Rh negative woman, major problems occur. And scientists learned about this basically in the 1940s, and they have developed workarounds for this over the years. If the fetus has Rh positive blood from the father, the Rh negative mother's immune system will attack the fetus as a foreign pathogen. The firstborn child may survive if the mother's immune system did not build up antibodies, but chances diminish with each child. The baby may die from this antibody attack or may suffer serious birth defects. The mother may die from complications. The possible birth defects include hydrops fetalis or edema, meaning severe swelling of tissues, particularly in the legs, but which can extend to the whole body. Oedipus survived his birth, but his mother's Rh negative blood damaged him permanently with hydrops or swelling of the legs and other parts of his body. Unlike the rest of the family of Abraham, Oedipus, Akhnaton, Bethuel received Rh positive blood from his father. This raises the question of why Nahor Laos, a brother of Abraham, had Rh positive blood. Perhaps he didn't. Some legends refer to Laius as an invert who wore women's clothing, just as Amenhotep III, as we shall see. The legends say Laius and Jocasta Milcah long had remained childless. Perhaps Jocasta became pregnant from an unknown Rh positive man after years of unsuccessful attempts to conceive with her invert king husband. One version of the legend says the servant left the child in the wasteland, and a shepherd found him and saved him. Another says rather than leaving him in the wasteland, the servant gave him to a shepherd. The legend says the shepherd took the child to the royal palace of Polybus and Merope in Corinth, who named him Oedipus because of his swollen feet. The word shepherd has a very occulted meaning, which a future video will discuss. And here we have Corinth in southern Illinois, in the region called Little Egypt in Illinois, and not very far from Thebes and Cairo, here on the very southern tip of Illinois near the Ohio River and the Mississippi River. In Oedipus's youth, the oracle at Delphi in Indiana told Oedipus that he would kill his father. Believing the oracle meant he would kill his adopted father, Polybus, Oedipus did not return to Corinth, but wandered away. And here we have Delphi in Indiana, not so far from Corinth and Thebes and Cairo. At a place where the roads crossed, Oedipus met his real father, King Laus. The driver of the chariot struck Oedipus, and he killed Laius and the driver. Some versions of the tale say Oedipus killed Laius to avenge a young man, Chrysippus, who Laius, an invert, had raped. He proceeded on to Thebes, where he answered the Sphinx riddle: what walks on 4 legs in the morning, on 2 legs in the day, and 3 legs in the evening? Man, who crawls as an infant, walks on 2 legs as an adult, and uses a cane in old age. The Sphinx then killed herself, like game show hosts do today. In gratitude for ridding the city of the Sphinx, the people of Thebes proclaimed him king. Oedipus married the widowed Queen Jocasta, his mother, and the dead Laius, his former wife. According to legend, Jocasta bore him 2 sons, Polynices and Eteocles, and 2 daughters, Antigone and Ismene, as in the Ismenian dragon or serpent, the Drakon Ismenios, killed by Cadmus. Some legends say Jocasta did not bear his children, but another wife, Eurygania, bore them. If Oedipus had Rh-positive blood, the Rh-negative Jocasta could not have borne his children. If Eurygania had Rh-positive blood, then she and Oedipus could have had children, or she could have conceived with another man if she had Rh-negative blood, and we'll discuss that possibility later. It is a wise father that knows his own child. Merchant of Venice, Act 2, Scene 2, Shakespeare. And of course, the opposite holds true. It's a wise child who knows his own father. As you will see, Akhnaton married his mother, Queen Tiye, as in Tea, or Jocasta, and had a younger wife, Nefertiti, or Eurygania. And here we have the famous bust of Eurygania, or Nefertiti. And you won't find an etymology of Eurygania online, or at least I could not, but we can do an interlanguage version of it. Eu in Greek means good, pleasant, or true. Re, as we saw in the Cadmus video, means a dragon, and we get our words for king, such as re, and ra, from it. And then gan means garden in Hebrew. And even today, some English speakers in the non-rhotic parts of English-speaking world, such as New England, will say the word garden as gone, as in Madison Square gone, or Boston gone. Okay, and then Nepher, if we have the RL transposition, could give us Nephel, or a giant, or fallen. And T or T, we'll wait to see later in the video, because that'll give us a connection to Tea and Transgenderism, a historical connection. Some bad thing occurred, a plague or something else. Tiresias, the blind seer we saw in the Dionysus video, told them the disaster happened because a man who had killed his father lived among them, and he must die or go into exile. Eventually the truth dawned on them. Jocasta hanged herself, and Oedipus blinded himself and eventually went into exile. Jocasta had a brother, Creon, which means leader, who plays an important role as the puppet master behind the scenes. Creon told the 2 brothers, Polynices and Eteocles, they should alternate rule 1 year at a time. Polynices, the older son, or perhaps the younger, we don't really know, occupied the throne first on the condition that he would cede it to his younger brother after a year, and then they would rotate rule. But after the younger brother, Eteocles, had ruled for a year, he refused to cede the crown to Polynices. We get no real names of important people in our myths, in the Bible, in history, or in the news. Creon means leader, not a name. Jocasta means something like playful. Oedipus means swollen feet or legs. Henry means king. Elizabeth may mean God Isa house or God Jesus house. Isa is a common name for Jesus, and that's how it is basically written in the Quran, where Quran mentions Jesus more than any other person in the whole book. quote, "But now, thus says the Lord who created you, O Jacob, and he who formed you, O Israel, fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by your name. You are mine." Isaiah 43:1, name magic. In Hebrew, the words in Isaiah, I think this should be 43:1, karati, mean called you. Kara, from Strong's Hebrew 71:21, is the word call, the verb call. And ti means you, the pronoun you, just as tu means you in Italian, Spanish, and Portuguese, or toi in French. And we'll see in a future video on cognates in Hebrew and other languages that Hebrew pronouns more or less reflect European pronouns. And this tea differs from the tea that we'll learn about having to do with Queen Tea and transgenderism. Polynices assembled an army with the help of his father-in-law, Adrastus, the king of Argos. 7 captains led the Argive army against Thebes and Eteocles. Aeschylus wrote about this in his 7 Against Thebes. Polynices and Eteocles killed each other in the battle. Legends say this war happened 20 years before the Trojan War. And eventually I'll try to do a video on where the Trojan War happened, not far from the rest of these events. And here we have Argos in northern Indiana, just north of Delphi, and still in the region of Little Egypt, and where a war really could have happened. After the deaths of Polynices and Eteocles, Creon, the brother of Jocasta, assumed the crown. He ordered a state funeral for Eteocles, but forbade anyone from burying Polynices. When Antigone tried to bury her brother, Creon ordered her buried alive. Creon's son Haman tried to intervene, but Creon had Antigone buried alive. Haman may have traveled with the exiled Oedipus. In some versions of the tale, Antigone hangs herself. Tiresias, the blind seer, descended from Eudaeus, one of the men sown from the serpent's teeth by Cadmus, and the tales vary as to how Tiresias became blind and gained the gift of foresight. Tiresias warns Creon not to imprison and kill Antigone, and foretells the doom of Thebes if Creon does what Tiresias warned about. And here we have a etching of Tiresias as a woman, because Hera transformed him into a woman for striking a snake, and later he got transformed back into a man and became blind, and you can look up that story. The Oedipus tale has various and contradicting endings. Some versions have Antigone dying, while others have her leaving Thebes to wander with her father. If Creon buried her and she hanged herself, then unless she became a zombie, she couldn't have left with her father. Some say Ismene, the surviving sister, wandered with her father. And here we have a painting by Franz Dietrich of Oedipus and Antigone, and I wanted just to show this, that it looks like here he has her painted with red hair too, although it's hard to tell because of the darkness of the picture. And the Amarna tablets are letters, and now we're going to move to the Akhnaton story. Like so much of our made-up history, Akhnaton miraculously appeared to historians in the late 19th century, after disappearing from history for thousands of years. Akhnaton and the city he built around 1350 BC, according to scholars, called Akhnaton, disappeared from history until by pure chance, in 1887, a peasant woman digging for fertilizer found a giant stash of clay tablets written in Akkadian and sold them to an antiquarian. Miraculously, the tablets made their ways to museums. All reputable historians buy this fantastical tale, that the tablets remained buried for more than 3,000 years, until by chance a peasant found them and managed to get them to the right person. And if anybody knows a reputable historian, I have this beautiful bridge in Brooklyn for sale at a very cheap and reasonable price. Here we have a picture labeled "The Ruins of Palace at Amarna, Egypt." And you can see what a magnificent palace this must have been. You know, it has this, suburban home size foundation there. And scholars tell us the name of the city Akhnaton means horizon of Aten, the god worshipped by Akhnaton. Bethuel means house of El. As Velikovsky showed, the story of Amenhotep IV, or Akhnaton, mirrors that of Oedipus to a remarkable degree. Akhnaton's father, Amenhotep III, like Laius, the father of Oedipus and the husband of Jocasta, had himself shown in art dressed in women's clothing. Velikovsky calls him an invert or homosexual and compares it to the story of Laius raping Chrysippus. And here we have a little statuette of Amenhotep III dressed as a woman. Here it says Amenophis, which is another name for Amenhotep III, and Ophis means snake, in his old age, wearing a type of gown usually worn by women. And this is an article by Cyril Aldred, a reputable British Egyptologist, in the Bulletin of the Metropolitan Museum of Art in February 1957. And you can see they probably identified him from his facial features. Queen Tea or Jocasta. Amenhotep III married Queen Tea or Tea. Historians tell us Queen Tea did not descend from royalty, but from a civil servant, a priest named Yuya, and his wife Tiye. Egyptologists suggest Yuya came from a foreign land, and some historians have have equated Yuya with Joseph from the Bible, but there's zero actual evidence of that. Tea became the great royal wife of the pharaoh Amenhotep III. And here we have a statue outside the Cairo Museum of Amenhotep or Amenophis III and Queen Tea, and you can see how well it survived for over 3,000 years, just so we could see it today and be impressed by it. The abrupt end of Amenhotep III. Amenhotep III abruptly disappeared from history in the 11th year of his reign. It appears as if she, Tea, were sole regent after the death of Amenhotep III and before the active reign of Amenhotep IV, Akhnaton. And Flinders Petries wrote that in his book Tel Amarna. Exactly like Jocasta in the Oedipus tale, Akhnaton never appeared in any art with Amenhotep III. Just as in the Oedipus tale, Amenhotep IV, or Akhnaton, does not appear in the story until after the death of his father, Amenhotep III, or Laius. And here we have a picture of Akhnaton with swollen legs, like Oedipus with swollen feet, and you see them here. Remember, pous in Greek refers to the feet or thighs, and regel in Hebrew can refer to the foot or legs, Strong's Hebrew 7272. And James Breasted wrote, the strange treatment of the lower limbs by Akhnaton's artist, and you can see the different spelling again there, is a problem which still remains unsolved and cannot be wholly accounted for by supposing a malformation of the king's own limbs. And A History of Egypt, page 378. And behind Akhnaton, we see a woman with this crown, and this is the solar disk, and she has a double feathers, and that means this represents Queen Tea. And of course, you can see that the Da Vinci of the time painted this magnificent art. Does Akhnaton mean Aaron or Moses? Several scholars have equated Akhnaton with Aaron, the brother of Moses, or with Moses. Ralph Ellis, in Jesus, Last of the Pharaohs, equated Aaron as Akhnaton. Amin Osman, in Moses and Akhnaton, equated Moses as Akhnaton. Ted Luke's Moses and Akhnaton, Brothers in Arms, has Moses as Tutmosis, the brother of Akhnaton. These scholars miss the important fact that in Exodus, Moses and his brother Aaron confronted Pharaoh and make demands. And, quote, later Moses and Aaron went in and said to Pharaoh, this is what Yahweh, the God of Israel, says, let my people go, so that they may hold a festival for me in the wilderness, Exodus 5:1. I think festival in the wilderness might refer to human sacrifice, which Akhnaton had forbidden, and he had ended all sacrifice, according to scholars. Akhnaton Aminadab. According to some sources, Akhnaton as a young man or child also went by the name Aminadab. Strong's Hebrew 599 defines Aminadab as my kinsman is noble. Strong's Greek 284 defines it as one of the prince's people and also calls him a kinsman of Christ. Quote, and Aaron took him Elisheba, daughter of Aminadab, sister of Nahshon, to wife, and she bare him Nadab, and Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar. Exodus 6:23. Quote, of Judah, Nahshon, the son of Aminadab. Numbers 1:7. I think these verses put Aaron and Moses in the same generation, or the close to generation of Akhnaton, but not as the Pharaoh, but as other important people obviously involved in the story. We just don't know exactly what. Like Oedipus, Amenhotep IV, who later changed his name to Akhnaton, suddenly appeared out of nowhere and assumed the reign. Akhnaton, like Oedipus, seems to have spent his childhood abroad. Historians that tell us that after a few years as king in Thebes, Akhnaton had a rift with the priest of Amun, or Amun-Ra, the sun god. Akhnaton created a new religion, moved from Thebes, and built a new city called Akhnaton, meaning the place where Aten rises, or horizon of Aten. And here, we have a historical interesting thing. Amun, or Amun-Ra, the sun god, in Hebrew, this word Ra, which in the Egyptian means the sun god, and it has a positive connotation. In Hebrew, this means evil. 25 years after the ancient discovery of the Amarna tablets, in 1912, German archaeologists discovered the famous bust of Nefertiti, or Nefertiti. And the spelling on the left is Velikovsky's, and I've used it because it just shows that you could spell these things various ways. The archaeologists supposedly smuggled the bust out of Egypt to Germany. Historians tell us the artist crafted this famous bust in about 1345 BC, and it survived for over 3,000 years buried in the dirt without losing its color or suffering damage. Only people who don't believe in Santa Claus would doubt this story. And here we have the bust. And you can see how well the colors have all survived. She has skin color, she has red lips, the colors have all survived on this band around the hat. And this, I think, is a tunic, maybe a necklace, but I think a tunic. And you can see the colors have all survived here. And you notice her very long neck. Some people say that people with Rh negative blood have an extra vertebrae, giving them long necks. I haven't, cut people apart, so I don't really know anything about that. Here we have a bust labeled Daughter of Akhnaton in the State Museum of Egyptian Art in Munich, Germany. And those trans investigators among you might notice that Grandma here has very big ears and a very pronounced brow ridges here and a very slanted back head, and of course a distended back of the head. Astronauts to the moon, ha 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 ha. People have talked about coneheads in our past. I don't really know. I've seen some evidence in videos, but, who knows? Historians tell us that Howard Carter arrived in Egypt in 1891 at the age of 17, sent there by rich people. On November 26, 1922, Carter and George Edward Stanhope Molyneux Herbert, 5th Earl of Carnarvon, entered King Tutankhamun's tomb. According to Minitrue, Carnarvon married an illegitimate daughter of Alfred D. Rothschild and became super rich. Luckily for Carter and Carnarvon, in the more than 3,000 years since the burial, the lazy Arabs who lived in Egypt hadn't found this magnificent discovery. It took an English lord and gentleman to reveal this wonder to the world. And here we have one of the most magnificent modern versions of the nobility, Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of the Moon, resplendent in orange, wearing an almost matching tiara of plastic red flowers, which reminds us of Titania in the Fairy Queen in the Midsummer's Night Dream, holding her wieners and telling the children how much she loves her wieners and because of their delicious taste, with a giant cup of pink tea here in the back. And we all have Jungle Surfer to thank for this image, which has indelibly sunk into my brain. According to Velikovsky, like Oedipus, Amenhotep IV Akhnaton married the wife of the dead king, Queen Tiye or Jocasta. This idea does not appear in reputable Egyptology, but Velikovsky makes some good points that reputable Egyptologists can't explain. Before getting to the evidence of Akhnaton having married Tiye, a couple more similarities between the Oedipus and Akhnaton stories. In the Oedipus story, a servant saved Oedipus by giving him to a shepherd who then gave the baby to the king and queen of Corinth. Among the many tombs at Amarna, archaeologists found the tomb of Parinepher, a simple servant called the servant with clean hands, who served Akhnaton as an infant. Historians have found no other reference to Akhnaton as an infant. In the Oedipus tales, Queen Jocasta's brother, Creon, ruler, plays an important role manipulating from behind the scenes. After the downfall of Oedipus, Creon pitted the young princes Eteocles and Polynices against each other, leading to their deaths. Creon then assumed the kingship. Queen Tiye had a brother named I, as in I, or in Aix-en-Provence, because the X is pronounced I without the vowel, the word beginning in a vowel on. Just as with the other names of the powerful, I probably means what it sounds like, I, as in the Eye of Horus, a title for an important position. Quote, there is no question that I was the most influential statesman in the days of Akhnaton. His power was even greater in the days of Tutankhamun, and after the premature death of the latter, he became pharaoh of Egypt, though he was not a prince by birth, and that's in Velikovsky's Oedipus and Akhnaton. Exactly like Creon in the Oedipus tales. Cyril Aldred, the English Egyptologist, concluded that I fathered Nefertiti or Nefertiti, which would mean Creon fathered Eurygania, and Creon may have fathered her children too, I think. And here we have the Eye of Horus, blue Eye of Horus. And on the left here we have the vulture goddess, Nekhbet, and the right we have the cobra god. A lot of people say goddess, but I think god, the cobra god, because the spitting venom represents male ejaculation. The blind seer Tiresias played an important role in the Oedipus tales and in the story of Bacchus Dionysus and the family of Cadmus. In the days of Amenhotep III and Akhnaton lived the seer Hapu, the holiest and wisest Egyptian. The Egyptians regarded Hapu as the patron of the blind, just like the blind Tiresias. Velikovsky argues persuasively that the tomb of Huya, the steward of Queen Tiye, shows that Akhnaton married his mother. An inscription in the tomb describes Huya as the superintendent of the house, of the double treasury, and of the harem of the great royal wife Tiye. Inscriptions in the tomb most often refer to Queen Tiye as the king's mother and great royal wife. Reputable Egyptologists interpret this to mean the mother of Akhnaton and the great royal wife of his father, Amenhotep III. Huya came into office under Akhnaton, after the death of Amenhotep III. Inscriptions in Huya's tomb date its construction as the 12th year of Akhnaton's reign. Velikovsky asked the question of why would Akhnaton have appointed Huya to the office of superintendent of the harem of Queen Tiye, the royal mother and dowager queen, years after Amenhotep III had died. According to Egyptian custom, the great wife of the reigning king kept his harem. Quote, the puzzling thing is not that Tiye kept a harem for her husband, but that she kept it for 12 years after she became a widow, that it was built in the new capital, which her husband did not live by several years to see, and that King Akhnaton, Tiye's son, who built her harem, also appointed a superintendent for this new establishment. End of quote. And again, that's Velikovsky and Oedipus and Akhnaton. And here we have a picture from the Huya's tomb, drawn by the Da Vinci of the day. Here we have Akhnaton eating something on a stick or a bone. And you can notice Akhnaton has this distended belly, and you can sort of see his swollen legs. And behind him, he has Queen Nefertiti. And down here, we have two little princesses with their iPads. And then over here, we have Queen Tiye, who we can recognize by her crown, the solar disk with the two feathers. And here we have Akhnaton, who's a little princess who's a little bit about the size of these, maybe smaller than this one and maybe bigger than this one. Hard to really tell because of the splendor of the art. And here we have a bust of Queen Tiye with the solar disk and the feathers, and I want take a look at her hair and her facial features, and she looks more or less like an African American woman of today, the misnomer African American, because as some people have shown, and the YouTube channel named UBTV has done a very good job of trying to show that the people we call African American actually always lived here in America. Akhnaton caused a problem for Egyptologists. Her young age of 4, 5, or at most 6 years old didn't fit with the known ages of the daughters of Nefertiti. They solved the problem by concluding she was not the youngest daughter of Nefertiti, but the daughter of Queen Tiye. This created another problem because the about 6-year-old Akhnaton does not appear in pictures until Akhnaton's 12th year. How could Amenhotep III have fathered the 4, 5, or 6-year-old Akhnaton with Tiye if he had died 12 years before? And here we have another picture from Huya's tomb. The left side of this picture from the 12th year of Akhnaton's reign shows Akhnaton and Nefertiti and 4 daughters facing them. On the right it shows Akhnaton with Tiye and Akhnaton facing him. It describes Tiye as, quote, the hereditary princess, great of favor, lady of grace, charming and loving kindness, filling the palace with her beauty, mistress of south and north, the great wife of the king, whom he loves, the lady of the 2 lands, Tiye. Next to Akhnaton it reads, the king's daughter of his body, beloved by him, Akhnaton. And notice that in both of these pictures we have the distended belly of the king, which applies to Akhnaton, the person with the strange build. Egyptologists recognized this problem. Norman de Davies concluded the right side of the picture depicts Amenhotep III, not Akhnaton. Davies recognized the problem that Amenhotep III had died 12 years before the picture and argued the pictures reflected an earlier co-regency. But Akhnaton never had a co-regency with his father and seems to have despised him by taking his name off monuments and things like that. Akhnaton, quote, the king's daughter of his body, end of quote, creates a major problem for reputable Egyptologists. And here we have another picture from Huya's tomb. This picture from Huya's tomb shows Akhnaton leading Queen Tiye and Akhnaton into the temple. Akhnaton leads Tiye by her hand as a lover, not as a son and mother. They look nude or almost nude. Nefertiti disappears from the record for the last 5 years of Akhnaton's reign. Scholars speculated about various possibilities for her disappearance, but no one knows. Velikovsky speculated that Queen Tiye drove her out. Tiye's brother and Nefertiti's father, took Nefertiti's side. And here we have the big start of the power struggle between the two, Creon I and Oedipus Akhnaton. In a variant of the Oedipus legend, he sent his younger wife, Eurygania, away in disgrace. I think Eurygania Nefertiti went to Europe and played an important role in the Genesis story, which I will eventually get to in a video. Akhnaton continued to rule for 4 or 5 years after the disappearance of Nefertiti. Scholars generally agree that a power struggle occurred and that Ai became more powerful. Before the end of his reign, Akhnaton kept the teenage prince Smenkare close to himself, and for a year or so made him co-ruler, and there's some indication of like a homosexual relationship between the king and his son. Smenkare married Meritaten, the eldest daughter of Nefertiti. And here we have Princess Meritaten, a bust in the Louvre, and again, you notice the modern African-American type features and the cornrow type hairstyle she has, which has really come back into vogue in modern times. And here we have a similar hairstyle, and I don't know the name of this young actress here. And here we have, again, Tutankhamun or Eteocles' face mask, and I wanted to show you the rear. On the right-hand side, you have the back side of it, and it has stylized cornrows with a long braided ponytail. The other brother, the famous Tutankhamun, married the third daughter of Nefertiti, Ankhesenpaten. Prior to Ankhesenpaten's marriage to Tutankhamun, historians tell us Akhnaton impregnated her, but their baby girl died soon after birth. This could indicate the daughter's Rh negative blood and its incompatibility with Akhnaton's Rh positive blood. Greek tradition says Oedipus wed his daughter, the virgin Asti Medusa. The Egyptian state started to fall apart under Akhnaton, just like with Oedipus. No one knows why, but scholars speculate famine, plague, or some natural disaster. A similar fate occurred during Oedipus's rule. Exodus tells us of many plagues visited on Pharaoh and the Egyptian people during the time of Aaron and Moses. And Aaron, we saw, married Elisheba, the daughter of Aminadab. No one knows which daughter of Oedipus traveled with him into exile. Antigone died, so I think Ismene, the dragon daughter, went with him. If Akhnaton also went into exile, which daughter went with him? I think Beckett-Taten, the young daughter of Queen Tiye, went with him and became Rebekah. They share the Beck syllable as in Thomas Becket. I think Beckett-Taten had Rh negative blood because Queen Tiye could not have conceived with Akhnaton, so I think she conceived with I, her brother. The Old Testament tells us that Abraham sent a servant to find a wife for his son Jacob. He encountered Rebekah, her father Bethuel, and her brother Laban in Genesis 24. Quote, and the damsel was very fair to look upon, a virgin, neither had any man known her, and she went down to the well, and filled her pitcher, and came up. Genesis 24:16. Strong's Hebrew 7259 defines Rebekah to mean ensnarer or fettering, not very complimentary names. I think Rebekah represents the hidden priestesses through the matriarchal line, hidden by the Jewish patriarchy. She has a title, and we don't know her real name. The first symbol of her name, Re, symbolizes the dragon, or the eye, or watcher, as we saw in video 29 on Cadmus. The contracting and expanding pupil of the eye symbolizes the female sexual organs and the hidden line of priestesses. In Basque, Beka means scholarship, Bekatu means sin, and Yatorisco Bekatua means original sin, or Peccatum originale. And you can see the similarity between Bekatu and Peccatum for sin. And of course, Beka means scholarship. And the serpent tempted Eve with knowledge or scholarship. The ending ah refers to the moon and the menstrual cycle. The female priesthood centers on the unbroken matriarchal line. The consecrated ones, the Nazar or Nazir, represent the hidden order of priestesses, Strong's Hebrew 5149. The Nazarites formed a group of dedicated individuals, both men and women, compare Numbers 66:2, who were spiritual leaders in their time, and that's a quote from the Theological Word Book of the Old Testament, 1340a. Nazar also can mean crown, as in the Keter of the Kabbalah, and that's also from 1340a. Nazar, or Nazir, gives us the Nazarene, a so-called early Christian sect, as in Jesus of Nazareth. Nazira, a female Arabic name, means observer, as in watcher. It has the feminine suffix a, representing the moon. Jesus, James the Just, John the Baptist, and the other major male players of the New Testament front for the hidden priestesses: Mary, Mary's mother Anne, Elizabeth, the mother of John the Baptist, and Mary Magdalene. We don't know the actual names of any of the players. For example, Mary, or Maria, means the seas. The Catholic Church mostly worships Mary, not Jesus. The Catholic Rosary has 53 Hail Marys and 6 Our Fathers, arranged as 10 Hail Marys preceded by 1 Our Father. Mary cults exist throughout the world, particularly in France, where people believe the Virgin Mary and Mary Magdalene traveled after the crucifixion. A lot of evidence exists for this idea, and people have written books about them. People make pilgrimages to Lourdes for Our Lady of Lourdes. The Virgin of Guadalupe, or La Morenita, the Brown Lady, plays an important role in Mexico. These female Nazir priestesses bore the sons of the angels. Quote, "And the angel Gabriel answered and said unto her, Mary, the Holy Ghost shall come upon thee, and the power of the highest shall overshadow thee. Therefore also that holy thing which shall be born of thee shall be called the Son of God." Luke 1:35. The mother, or mater, opens the matrix to the material world. Now Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived, and bore Cain, and said, I have acquired a man from the Lord Yahweh. Genesis 4:1. Eve acquired a man from Yahweh. She doesn't say from Adam, but from Yahweh. Quote, "And the Lord caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam, and he slept. And he took one of his ribs," strong Hebrew 67:63, Selah, with a great similarity to Tesla, "and closed up the fish instead thereof. And the rib which the Lord God had taken from man made he a woman, and brought her unto man." Genesis 2:21-22. These verses give us the source of the link between tea and transgenderism. In Sumerian, tea means rib and to live. The gods created Ninti, Nin meaning woman, and Ti, or Ti, meaning rib, the lady of the rib, to save Enki after he had eaten forbidden flowers. Eve, or Hava, in Hebrew means life-giver, or live, or life. Strong's Hebrew 23:32. Thank you for watching. The next video will discuss Jesus in the Old Testament. A branch of theology called typology studies symbolic appearances of Jesus in the Old Testament. The next video will not deal in typology, but show that Jesus actually plays an important role in the Old Testament, an obvious role hidden by the strong delusion and education, also known as brainwashing.